The sun hung low over Briarwood's bustling street market, casting long shadows across stalls piled with rusted engine parts, leather hides and jars of spiced oil that thickened the air with a sharp, metallic tang. Dust swirled in lazy eddies from the gravel paths, kicked up by the shuffle of boots and the low rumble of idling motorcycles parked along the edge. It was the kind of afternoon where the heat pressed down like a heavy hand, making every breath feel borrowed. Amid the haggling voices and the clink of tools, a small figure darted through the crowd, a boy no older than 11, his dark hair tousled and eyes wide with a mix of fear and fierce determination. He clutched a faded photo in one hand, his other trembling, as he weaved past towering adults, searching, always searching. Owen Sato had been coming to this market for weeks, ever since the whispers in his empty apartment grew too loud to ignore. His mother, Lena, had vanished 6 months ago, leaving behind only echoes, a cold coffee mug on the counter, a half-finished puzzle on the kitchen table, and that nagging sense of something stolen in the night. The police called it a runaway case, filing it away with shrugs and paperwork, but Owen knew better. He'd found the box she hid under her bed, the one with the note in her neat handwriting, "If I don't come back, follow the fire." And now, here he was, heart pounding like a trapped bird, scanning faces until his gaze locked on a man who stood out like a storm cloud in the haze. Declan Torch Hayes leaned against a stall counter, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of a chrome carburetor he was negotiating for. At 37, he carried the weight of the road in his broad shoulders and the faint scars that mapped his forearms like forgotten rivers. His Ash Creek Brotherhood patch gleamed on the back of his weathered leather vest, a symbol of the family he'd forged from the ashes of his own broken one. The necklace around his neck swung lightly as he moved. A simple silver chain holding a ring he'd kept for years, its stone chipped with a peculiar blue fleck that caught the light like a fractured sky. He didn't know why he wore it. It was a relic from a night of flames and failure, a promise he'd made to a ghost. Owen stopped dead in front of him, the boy's small hand shooting out to grab the frayed edge of Declan's vest. The biker looked down, his steel-grey eyes narrowing in surprise. The market noise faded to a distant hum, the sizzle of street food, the bark of vendors, as the child's voice cut through, raw and unfiltered. "Why do you have my mom's ring?" Declan froze, the carburetor slipping from his grasp to clatter on the wooden stall. The vendor raised an eyebrow, but Declan didn't notice. His hand instinctively went to the chain, fingers brushing the cool metal of the ring. The boy's eyes, sharp and unblinking, fixed on it with the intensity of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "It's hers," Owen pressed, pulling a crumpled photo from his pocket. An old smartphone snapshot, grainy but clear. In it, a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile held up her hand, the ring glinting on her finger. The blue fleck was unmistakable, a tiny imperfection that now burned into Declan's memory like a brand. The world tilted. Declan dropped to one knee right there in the dirt, the gravel biting into his jeans, his massive frame folding as if the weight of unseen years had finally caught up. Faces turned, murmurs rippling through the crowd like wind over dry grass, but he couldn't hear them. All he saw was the photo, the ring, and the boy's face, a mirror of confusion and quiet desperation. "Kid," Declan rasped, his voice gravelly from years of dust-choked highways, "where'd you get this?" Owen's lower lip quivered, but he held his ground, the market's chaos swirling around them like a forgotten backdrop. "Her name's Lena Sato. She disappeared. Said if anything happened, I'd know the ring when I saw it. That blue crack in the stone, it's like a sky that broke. You have it. Why?" Declan's mind reeled back 7 years. To a rain-slicked highway outside Ash Creek. The call had come over the club's radio, a car fire, bad one, flames licking the night sky. He'd been the first on scene, the Brotherhood's unofficial fire whisperer, pulling the driver from the wreck. A woman, coughing smoke, her hand clutching his arm as he dragged her free. In the chaos, As sirens wailed in the distance, she'd pressed something into his palm, the ring, and whispered, "Keep it safe, for the promise." Then shadows swallowed her, the ambulance lights flashing, and he'd thought she'd perished in the inferno. The official report said one fatality, body too charred to identify. But now... "I found it that night," Declan said slowly, his thumb rubbing the stone as if it might speak. "Thought you were gone." He meant the woman, but the words hung heavy, pulling Owen into the gravity of it. The boy stepped closer, the scent of cheap soap and fear clinging to him. "She left me a box. Instructions. Said to find the man who carried it out of the fire." The vendor cleared his throat, but Declan waved him off, rising slowly with Owen's photo still in hand. The market felt smaller now, the sun dipping lower, painting everything in hues of amber and regret. This wasn't coincidence. It was a thread from the past unraveling into the present, tugging at the promises Declan had buried under miles of blacktop. The Brotherhood had taught him loyalty ran deeper than blood, that honor was the only currency that didn't tarnish. And here was a kid, alone in the world, handing him a ghost's directive. "Tell me everything," Declan said, his voice steadying like an engine firing to life. He glanced at the parked bikes, their chrome gleaming under the fading light, and felt the pull of the road calling him to action. Owen nodded, eyes lighting with a spark of hope, and in that moment, amid the dying bustle of the market, a new pact formed, one that would drag them both into shadows neither could have foreseen, bound by a ring and the fire it had escaped. As the first stars pricked the twilight sky, Declan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, the weight of it grounding them both. The air cooled, carrying the faint whine of distant engines, and for the first time in years, the ring felt less like a burden and more like a beacon. Little did they know it held secrets sharper than any blade, proof hidden in its heart that could topple empires built on lies. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of revelation, it was enough to start the ride. The gravel crunched under Declan's boots as he led Owen away from the market's fading clamour, the boy's small steps quickening to match his stride. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, leaving Briarwood streets bathed in the soft glow of sodium lamps that flickered like hesitant fireflies. The air carried the lingering bite of exhaust and fried dough from the stalls, but it was the weight of silence between them that pressed heaviest. Declan's mind raced, piecing together fragments of that long-ago night. The acrid smoke choking his lungs, the woman's desperate grip as flames roared behind them. He'd replayed it 1,000 times on solitary rides, convincing himself her end was swift, merciful. But the ring, cool against his chest, whispered otherwise. Owen clutched the photo tighter, his knuckles white, as they approached the row of motorcycles lined up like silent guardians. Declan's bike, a battered black Harley with scars from too many close calls, sat at the end, its tank reflecting the streetlight in fractured silver. "Hop on," Declan said, voice low and steady, swinging a leg over the seat. He handed Owen a spare helmet from the saddlebag, oversized comically so on the boy's head, but it muffled the world just enough to make the ride feel safe. The engine growled to life with a throaty rumble that vibrated through their bones, scattering a few late-night stragglers who glanced over with wary eyes. As they pulled onto the open road, the wind whipped past, carrying away the market's chaos and replacing it with the clean rush of highway air, laced with the faint scent of pine from the encroaching woods. The Ash Creek Brotherhood Clubhouse loomed on the outskirts of town, a weathered ranch house converted into a fortress of loyalty. Faded red brick walls patched with murals of roaring eagles and crossed pistons, surrounded by a chain-link fence that rattled in the breeze. Floodlights cast long shadows across the gravel lot, where a handful of bikes were already parked, their riders' silhouettes visible through the open garage doors. Laughter spilled out, mingled with the clink of bottles and the low strum of a guitar. But Declan felt the shift as he killed the engine. Heads turned, the easy camaraderie pausing like a held breath. He helped Owen dismount, the boy's legs wobbling slightly from the ride, eyes wide as he took in the scene. "This is home," Declan murmured, more to himself than the kid, guiding him through the side door into the main hall. The interior was a tapestry of road-worn relics, walls lined with framed photos of rides past, a massive oak bar scarred from countless nights, and the faint haze of cigar smoke hanging like old memories. At the far end, a group of 4 bikers huddled around a pool table, cues pausing mid-shot as Declan entered with the stranger in tow. Rourke, the club's grizzled sergeant-at-arms, straightened first, his salt-and-pepper beard framing a face etched with lines from too many sun-baked patrols. "Torch, who's the shadow?" His voice was a gravel drawl, laced with the protectiveness that bound them all. Beside him, Lena Sparks Ruiz, the only woman in their inner circle and a wizard with wiring, arched an eyebrow, her tattooed arms crossed over her chest. The others, Jax, the young hothead with a fresh scar on his jaw, and old-timer Silas, who nursed a perpetual coffee, watched with quiet curiosity. Declan pulled out a chair for Owen at the scarred wooden table, the boy's gaze darting like a cornered animal. "This is Owen, and he's got a story that hits close." He sat across from him, the ring now dangling openly from his chain, catching the warm light of the hanging bulb. The room settled, the pool game forgotten as the Brotherhood drew in, forming a loose circle. Owen hesitated, then slid the photo across the table, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "My mom, Lena, she worked numbers for a shop downtown. Tires, oil changes, that kind of place. But she said it was more, said if she ever didn't come home, I'd know what to do." Declan nodded, urging him on with a tilt of his head. The boy described the box under the bed. Plain cardboard, taped shut, hidden behind dusty shoeboxes. Inside, besides the note, "Follow the fire," were clippings from old news about a highway blaze and a small key, its teeth worn smooth. "She told me the ring wasn't just jewelry. It was important, like a message." Owen's eyes flicked to Declan's neck, the blue fleck in the stone seeming to pulse under the scrutiny. Rourke leaned in, his massive frame casting a shadow. "That fire 7 years back, the one you pulled the driver from?" Declan met his gaze, the memory surfacing like smoke, tires screeching on wet asphalt, the crunch of metal as he forced the door open, her hand thrusting the ring into his before medics swarmed. "Yeah, thought she didn't make it, but this—" He unclasped the chain, laying the ring on the table. It rolled once, settling with a soft clink. Up close, the stone's imperfection wasn't just a chip, it felt deliberate, a seam almost invisible to the untrained eye. Sparks reached for it gently, her mechanic's fingers probing the edges. "This ain't no ordinary setting. Look here, the band's got a give." With a pocket tool from her belt, she applied pressure, and a faint click echoed, sharper than a gunshot in the quiet room. The stone popped free, revealing not a hollow, but a tiny compartment, no bigger than a grain of rice. Inside, wedged tight, was a microchip, its surface etched with data ports that gleamed dully. The air thickened, the guitar's idle strumming cutting off entirely. Jax whistled low. "What the hell's that?" Silas, ever the voice of caution, stroked his chin. "Lena Sato. Rings a bell. Worked at that garage off Route 9? Word is, it was a front, laundering cash for some suits uptown." Owen's face paled, but his jaw set firm. "She was scared the last weeks. Came home late, jumping at shadows. Said she copied something, files, proof of dirty money flowing through the shop. Hid it so no one could find it easy." Declan's gut twisted. This wasn't just a lost mother anymore. It was a web, spun from greed and shadows, with Lena at its frayed edge. The ring, his talisman of failure, now burned with purpose, a promise she'd encoded in fire and stone, linking her fate to his. He pocketed the chip carefully, the weight of it heavier than the Harley outside. "We're in this now, kid. The Brotherhood doesn't walk from family, blood or not." Owen looked up, the fear in his eyes softening to something like trust. fragile as dawn light. Rourke clapped a hand on Declan's shoulder, the gesture sealing it, a silent vow among brothers. But as the night deepened, the clubhouse's warmth couldn't chase the chill creeping in. Whispers of corruption echoed in their minds, and out there, in the dark beyond the fence, unseen eyes might already be turning toward the boy and the biker who'd answered his call. The road ahead twisted with peril, but in that circle of leather and resolve, loyalty ignited like an engine at first spark, unyielding, ready to burn through the lies. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The clubhouse's overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting jagged shadows across the wooden beams as the Brotherhood settled into the gravity of the revelation. The microchip lay on the table like a forbidden artifact, its tiny edges catching the flicker from a nearby lamp. Declan stared at it, the cool metal of the ring now empty in his palm, feeling the shift from relic to weapon. Owen sat rigidly beside him, the oversized helmet discarded on the floor, his small frame swallowed by the chair that had seen decades of hard truths. The air hung thick with the scent of aged leather and cooling coffee. The earlier laughter evaporated into a tense hush, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl outside. Rourke broke the silence first, his voice a low rumble that commanded attention without raising in volume. "We need to know what's on that thing before we move. Sparks, you got the gear?" She nodded, already rising with the fluid grace of someone who'd patched more than engines in her time. Her boots echoed softly on the plank floor as she crossed to a side room, returning with a battered laptop, its case scarred from road spills and bar fights, and a tangle of cables. The group leaned in as she connected the chip, the screen's blue glow illuminating faces etched with quiet resolve. Owen's breath hitched, his fingers twisting the hem of his shirt, but he didn't look away. Lines of code scrolled across the display, folders unfolding like secrets pried from a locked chest. "Encrypted, but not pro-level," Sparks muttered, her fingers flying over the keys, the rapid clicks a staccato rhythm in the room. Minutes stretched, the clock on the wall ticking like a countdown. Then, a breakthrough. A password prompt that yielded to a simple phrase Owen supplied in a whisper. "Follow the fire." The files bloomed open, spreadsheets dense with numbers, dates, and names, transactions funneled through the garage on Route 9, tires and tune-ups masking wire transfers, shell companies siphoning cash from what looked like city contracts. Millions laundered clean as desert sand. Jax's eyes widened, his fresh scar pulling tight as he scowled. "This is big. Look here, Councilman Hale's signature on half these approvals, and the garage owner, Victor Kane. He's got ties to every shady deal in Briarwood." Silas grunted in agreement, sipping his coffee, the steam curling like smoke signals. Declan traced a line in the data, his gut clenching at a highlighted entry. Lena Sato, listed not as employee, but as internal auditor. Notes in the margins. In what might have been her handwriting, discrepancies flagged, a warning about eyes watching. The last entry, dated 6 months prior, ended abruptly. "Files copied, ring secure. If compromised, seek the carrier." Owen leaned forward, his voice barely above the hum of the laptop fan. She was scared of Kane, came home one night with bruises on her arms, said it was from work, but her eyes, they were different, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. The boy's words landed heavy, stirring the room's undercurrent of anger into something sharper, more personal. Declan felt it coil in his chest, an echo of his own buried failures, the fire he'd walked away from, the promise he'd carried unknowingly. This wasn't just data, it was Lena's stand against the rot. A mother's bid to shield her son from the fallout. "We ride to the garage at first light," Declan said, his tone brooking no argument, the decision settling over the group like a shared oath. Rourke nodded, already mentally mapping the approach. Scout the perimeter, avoid drawing heat. But Silas held up a weathered hand, his eyes sharp beneath bushy brows. Hold, this ain't a smash and grab. Kane's got pull. Cops on payroll, maybe worse. We poke this, it pokes back, and the kid. He glanced at Owen, who met his gaze steadily, the fear tempered by a spark of defiance that mirrored Lena's in the photo. "I'm coming," Owen insisted, his small fists clenching on the table. The room stilled, the weight of his resolve hanging in the air. Declan searched the boy's face, seeing the same quiet fire that had driven him through the market crowd. Loyalty wasn't chosen lightly in the Brotherhood. It was earned in the crucible of the road. "You stay here," Declan replied, gently but firm. "With Silas. Safe. This promise. It's mine to keep now." Owen's shoulders slumped, but he nodded, the trust in his eyes a fragile bridge across the unknown. As the group dispersed to prepare, Rourke checking weapons in the armory, Sparks backing up the files to a secure drive. The night outside deepened, stars wheeling overhead like distant witnesses. Declan stepped onto the porch, the cool breeze carrying the earthy tang of impending rain, and lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the empty ring on his chain. The data burned in his mind. Lena hadn't run. She'd been erased, her traces scrubbed to protect the scheme, but she'd left breadcrumbs, trusting the fire's survivor to follow. He exhaled smoke into the darkness, the ember glowing like a promise reignited. Dawn crept in slow, painting the horizon in streaks of bruised purple and gold. The convoy assembled in the lot, 5 bikes, engines purring low to avoid waking the town, their riders clad in black leather that blended with the shadows. Declan led, Owen watching from the clubhouse window, Silas's hand on his shoulder. The road to Route 9 wound through sparse woods, mist rising from the asphalt like ghosts of forgotten wrecks. The garage appeared as a squat building off the highway, its neon sign flickering Kane's Auto against the morning haze. Bays shuttered, but a single light burning in the office window. They parked a quarter-mile out, approaching on foot through the underbrush, the crunch of leaves muffled under their boots. Declan signaled a halt at the tree line, binoculars revealing movement. 2 guards patrolling the lot, walkie-talkies crackling, and a sleek sedan pulling in. Kane himself, broad-shouldered and sharp-suited, stepping out with a briefcase that screamed payoff. Heart pounding with the rhythm of justice deferred, Declan watched as Kane entered the office, the door swinging shut behind him. This was the heart of the web, and Lena's shadow lingered in its corners. A twig snapped nearby, too close. Declan spun, hand dropping to his sidearm, only to see Jax freeze, sheepish. But in that split second, headlights pierced the mist from the opposite road, a patrol car slowing unnaturally near the garage. Corruption's reach, already stirring. The air thickened with urgency, the scent of pine and diesel fueling their resolve. They had the proof, but extraction meant risking everything. Lena's life, Owen's safety, the Brotherhood's code. As the first raindrops fell, cool and insistent, Declan made the call. Infiltrate now, before the noose tightened. The dash to the side fence was a blur of motion, wire cutters snipping through chain link with a whisper. Inside, the garage loomed dark and cavernous, tools hanging like silent sentinels, the faint drip of oil echoing off concrete floors. Declan and Rourke slipped toward the office, hearts sinking to the pulse of the storm building outside. Sparks hung back with Jax, eyes on the guards. What they found in those files wasn't just numbers, it was a map to Lena, hidden in plain sight among the ledgers. But as Declan's fingers brushed a locked drawer, a floorboard creaked overhead, and the rain's patter masked the sound of approaching footsteps. The promise pulled them deeper into the shadows, where loyalty would be tested in the fire of truth. Rain lashed against the garage's corrugated roof like impatient fingers, turning the concrete yard into a slick mirror of reflected headlights. Declan crouched low beside Rourke in the narrow alley between tool racks and stacked tires, the air thick with the metallic tang of wet rust and motor oil that seeped from unseen cracks. The office door loomed ahead, A flimsy barrier of frosted glass etched with grime, the single light inside spilling a jaundiced glow that danced with the storm's fury. Footsteps echoed from above, deliberate, unhurried, suggesting someone lingered in the loft, perhaps Kane himself, poring over ledgers that hid more than profits. Rourke's breath was steady, a counterpoint to the thunder rumbling in Declan's chest. The big man's hand rested on the door handle, muscles coiled like a spring under his rain-slicked jacket. "One shot," he whispered, eyes meeting Declan's in the dimness, a silent affirmation of the bond forged in countless shadowed runs. No words needed. The Brotherhood's code was etched in every glance, every shared risk. Declan nodded, his fingers itching toward the locked drawer he'd glimpsed through the window earlier. A plain metal thing, unassuming amid the clutter of invoices and calendars. But its position screamed secrecy. The door gave with a soft click, hinges protesting faintly under Rourke's careful pressure. They slipped inside, the office enveloping them in stale warmth. The hum of a space heater battling the chill, stacks of papers yellowed by time, and the faint, acrid whiff of ink from a printer in the corner. Declan moved to the desk, his boots silent on the threadbare carpet, while Rourke positioned himself by the window, peering into the storm-lashed lot where Sparks and Jax maintained their vigil. The microchip's data had pointed here, references to backup archives in the garage's secure files, a digital trail Lena might have left to corroborate her copies. Declan's hand closed around the drawer's handle, the cool brass grounding him as he jimmied it with a slim tool from his pocket. It popped open with a reluctant scrape, revealing not cash or weapons, but a slim ledger bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with handwritten notes in a precise script that matched the photo's edges. Lena's. Heart quickening, he flipped through, the rain's rhythm masking the page's rustle. Entries detailed discrepancies, inflated invoices for phantom repairs, funds rerouted to offshore accounts under aliases that tied back to Councilman Hale's pet projects. But deeper in, a folded sheet caught his eye. A map hand-drawn marking a remote cabin off Route 17, annotated with L.S. Holding, Priority Extraction. Lena's initials circled in red, like a beacon in the fog. A floorboard groaned louder now, directly overhead, followed by the scrape of a chair. Declan froze, tucking the ledger into his vest, the paper crinkling against his chest like a whispered confession. Rourke signaled, 2 fingers, then a fist, indicating movement toward the stairs. The air grew heavier, charged with the scent of damp earth seeping through the walls as shadows shifted on the ceiling. This wasn't just evidence, it was a lifeline, proof Lena had fought back, encoding her location in the very records meant to bury her. But pursuit meant exposure, and with Owen waiting back at the clubhouse, the stakes twisted like barbed wire around Declan's resolve. They eased toward the exit, but the door to the loft swung open with a creak that cut through the storm. A figure descended the stairs, not Kane, but a wiry man in grease-stained overalls, his face gaunt under the brim of a cap, eyes bleary from interrupted sleep. He paused at the bottom, hand fumbling for a light switch, the beam snapping on to flood the office in harsh white. "What the—" His voice cracked, surprise turning to alarm as he spotted the intruders. Rourke lunged first, a blur of controlled force, clamping a hand over the man's mouth and pinning him against the wall with a forearm like iron. The guard struggled, muffled grunts escaping, his free hand clawing for a drawer, likely a phone or alarm. Declan stepped forward, voice low and edged with the gravel of highways past. "Easy, we're not here for you, just answers." The man's eyes darted wildly, recognition flickering as he took in the Brotherhood patch on Declan's vest. Fear, then calculation. He knew the club's reputation, the unwritten rules of the road that demanded respect over recklessness. "We know about the books," Declan continued, keeping his tone even, the rain's drumbeat urging haste. "Lena Sato, she worked here. Where is she?" The guard's struggles eased slightly, his gaze flicking to the ledger's absence, then back. Rourke's grip tightened just enough to remind him of the cost of lies. After a tense beat, the man rasped, "Gone. Kane's orders. Said she asked too many questions, poked where she shouldn't. Took her to the old mill site up by the river. That was months back, didn't come back." The words landed like a punch, stirring the embers of Declan's guilt, the fire he'd pulled her from, only for shadows to claim her again. But the map burned in his mind, contradicting the tale. Was this deflection or a crumb of truth? The guard's eyes held no malice, only the weariness of a man caught in gears larger than himself. "Please," he added, voice breaking, "I got a family. Don't drag me in." Declan searched his face, the ethical weight pressing down, the line between justice and vengeance blurring in the dim light. The Brotherhood stood for more than muscle. It was honor, choosing the right path even when it twisted. "You say nothing," he warned, "and we walk, but if you're lying—" He let the implication hang, heavy as the storm outside. Rourke released him slowly, the guards slumping against the wall, nodding furiously as they backed toward the door. Outside, the rain had eased to a steady patter, slicking the lot where sparks flashed a light twice. All clear. They melted into the shadows, regrouping at the bikes hidden in the tree line. The ledger's map pointed north toward isolation and potential traps, but it was a thread to Lena, woven from her courage. As engines roared to life, low and muffled against the wind, Declan felt the pull of the promise sharpen, not just to find her, but to shield Owen from the darkness she'd fled. The road ahead gleamed wet under the moon, a silver path through uncertainty, where loyalty would forge their redemption or break them entirely. Back at the clubhouse, dawn's first light filtered through the windows as Declan spread the map on the table, Owen's eyes widening at the revelation. The boy traced the lines with a finger, hope flickering amid the worry. Silas brewed coffee, the aroma grounding the tension, while Rourke recounted the encounter in clipped tones. The guard's words echoed, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, hinting at layers of deceit Kane had layered to protect his empire. But the map was real, Lena's hand evident in every curve, a mother's directive, trusting the man who'd carried her fire. As the group planned the next ride, the air hummed with purpose, the chosen family binding tighter against the encroaching threat. Owen stepped closer to Declan, the ring, now hollow but no less vital, dangling between them like a shared heartbeat. The promise endured, pulling them toward truth, where justice waited not in flames, but in the quiet strength of those who refused to let go. If this chapter's tension has you on the edge, smash that like button. It fuels stories like this one. The morning sun clawed its way through the clubhouse curtains, painting the scarred oak table in slivers of gold that danced across the unfolded map. Declan traced the inked lines with a calloused finger, the paper crinkling softly under his touch, releasing a faint, musty scent that mingled with the rich bitterness of Silas's fresh coffee brewing in the corner. Owen hovered close, his small frame leaning against Declan's side, eyes fixed on the circled initials, LS, as if willing them to reveal more than ink on parchment. The room hummed with quiet preparation. Rourke oiling a chain lock with methodical strokes, the metallic click echoing like a heartbeat. Sparks testing a handheld scanner, its screen flickering blue in the dim light. The air carried the earthy promise of dew-kissed roads outside, but beneath it lingered the sharp tang of resolve, sharpened by the night's revelations. "This cabin's off the beaten path," Declan said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the hush, folding the map with care before tucking it into his vest pocket. "Route 17 forks into nothing but old logging trails. If Lena's trace is anywhere, it's there." He glanced at Owen, the boy's face a mask of fragile hope, shadows under his eyes from a night spent staring at ceilings. The ring's empty compartment hung around Declan's neck, a hollow reminder of secrets unearthed, now fueling the drive forward. Loyalty in the Brotherhood wasn't shouted, it was this. Silent pacts sealed in glances, pulling them into the unknown for a woman none had met and a boy who'd become kin. Owen nodded, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. She drew that arrow herself, said in the box notes to trust the path, no matter the turns. Silas handed him a mug of warm milk, the steam curling up like a gentle veil, and the old-timer's weathered hand lingered on the boy's shoulder, a grandfatherly anchor in the storm of adults. "We'll bring her back, son. Promises like hers don't fade easy." The words wrapped around Owen like the club's worn leather, easing the knot in his chest just enough to breathe. The convoy rolled out at mid-morning, engines growling to life in the gravel lot, their throaty harmony vibrating through the earth like a call to arms. Declan rode point, Owen secured behind him on the Harley, the boy's arms wrapped tight around his waist, helmet bobbing with each bump. The wind rushed past, cool and laced with the wild scent of pine and damp soil, whipping away the clubhouse's confines as Route 17 unfurled ahead, a ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by dense woods that whispered of hidden depths. Rourke and Sparks flanked them, Jax bringing up the rear, their bikes cutting through the light traffic, like shadows reclaiming the light. No words passed over the roar. The road spoke for them, its curves a test of balance and trust. The fork came abrupt, gravel spitting under tires as they veered onto the narrower trail, branches clawing at the sky overhead. The cabin emerged after an hour's twist, a sagging structure of weathered pine, half swallowed by overgrowth, its roof patched with mismatched tin that rattled in the breeze. Vines snaked up the walls like veins, and the air hung heavy with the rot of fallen leaves and stagnant water from a nearby creek. Declan killed the engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the drip of moisture from eaves and the distant trill of birds, nature's indifferent chorus to human strife. They dismounted, boots sinking into the soft earth, the group fanning out with instinctive caution, Rourke circling the perimeter, Sparks scanning for recent tracks. Owen stayed glued to Declan's side, his eyes scanning the porch where a single rocking chair swayed empty, creaking like a forgotten sigh. "This feels like her," the boy murmured, pointing to a faded flower box by the door, wilted petals clinging to soil that might have once bloomed under Lena's care. Declan pushed the door open with a shoulder, hinges groaning in protest, revealing an interior dim and dust-moted, lit only by shafts of sunlight piercing cracked windows. The space was sparse, a threadbare rug, a cold stone hearth with ashes long settled, and a kitchen table bearing the weight of solitude. But on it, a notebook lay open, pages yellowed but undisturbed. Lena's script spilling across them in hurried loops. Declan approached, heart thudding against his ribs, the floorboards flexing under his weight with muffled protests. The entries chronicled her flight, dates marking her escape from the garage, notes on watches in the rear view, and a plea scrawled in the margin. "Torch, if you find this. Know I survived the blaze for Owen. The chip holds the key. Use it to end Kane's grip. He's closer than you think." The name hit like a spark to dry tinder. Kane, the architect of the web, his influence reaching even here. Owen peered over Declan's arm, a gasp escaping as he touched the page, the ink smudged but alive with his mother's voice. Outside, Rourke's low whistle cut the air, signal for company. They converged at the window, peering through grime to see dust rising from the trail. Two black SUVs, unmarked but purposeful, grinding to a halt 50 yards out. Figures emerged, suits ill-suited to the woods, flanked by men in tactical gear, their movements crisp and coordinated. Kane's enforcers, no doubt drawn by the same breadcrumbs or a tip from the garage guard's loose tongue. The lead suit scanned the cabin with binoculars, his face a mask of calculated calm, while his companions fanned out, hands hovering near concealed holsters. Tension coiled like a spring in Declan's gut, the ethical bind tightening. Retreat meant losing the trail. Confrontation risked the boy and the fragile proof. "Back exit," he whispered, scooping the notebook and guiding Owen toward a rear door half hidden by shelves. Sparks disabled a simple alarm with a quick bypass, her tools whispering against wires. While Jax and Rourke bought time, engines revving in feigned casualness to mask their retreat. The group slipped into the underbrush, hearts pounding in sync with the rustle of leaves, the creek's murmur covering their steps. Owen's hand gripped Declan's, small but unyielding, a tether in the chaos. From the tree line they watched the intruders swarm the cabin, flashlights piercing the gloom, voices barking orders that echoed hollow against the woods. One suit emerged moments later, notebook in hand, face twisting in frustration, no, fury, as realization dawned. Kane's reach was vast, but sloppy. They'd disturbed the nest without claiming the prize. As the SUVs peeled away, tires churning mud, Declan felt the moral clarity sharpen. This wasn't vengeance, but restitution. Honoring Lena's stand by exposing the corruption that had torn her from her son. The ride back was urgent, wind tearing at their jackets, the notebook secure against Declan's chest like a second heartbeat. Owen's grip loosened slightly, trust blooming in the shared silence, while the Brotherhood's formation held firm, a chosen family navigating the shadows. But as Briarwood's lights flickered into view, a patrol car tailed them at a distance, lights off but insistent. The noose drew tighter, Kane's influence bleeding into the streets, testing the promise's endurance. In the rear view, Declan caught Owen's reflection, eyes fierce with the same quiet fire that had ignited this path. Redemption waited not in destruction, but in the unbreaking loyalty that carried them through the gathering storm, 1 mile at a time. The patrol car's headlights sliced through the twilight like accusatory fingers, trailing at a calculated distance on the winding stretch of Route 17. Declan's grip tightened on the handlebars, the Harley's engine thrumming beneath him as he pushed the speed just enough to test the shadow behind. Steady, unyielding, its grille a dark maw in the rearview mirror. Wind howled past, carrying the crisp bite of cooling earth and the faint metallic whisper of rain-scented air, whipping Owen's arms tighter around his waist. The boy hadn't spoken since the cabin. His helmeted head pressed against Declan's back, but the notebook tucked inside Declan's vest pulsed like a second pulse, its pages heavy with Lena's defiance. Rourke's bike surged alongside, a low growl in the fading light. His signal light flashing once split the pack. Declan nodded imperceptibly, veering left onto a secondary road that snaked through denser woods. Gravel pinging off the undercarriage like scattered warnings. Sparks and jacks peeled right, their taillights vanishing into the gloom, drawing the pursuit like decoys in a high-stakes game. The air thickened with the scent of pine sap and damp moss, branches arching overhead like a natural vault, muffling the distant wail of sirens that now echoed faintly from the fork. Owen shifted, his voice muffled but urgent through the comlink in the helmet. They're closing. What if they know about the book? Declan's jaw set, the road's curves demanding focus as he downshifted, the engine's roar softening to a predatory purr. They know enough to chase, but we've got her words now, enough to light the fire. The notebook's revelations burned in his mind. Lena's entries detailing Kane's enforcers, safe houses marked with cautionary notes, and a final plea. The mill by the river holds the last piece. Torch, for Owen's sake, end it clean. The old mill site, the guard's vague mention from the garage, now aligned with her script. A convergence point, perhaps where she'd been taken or hidden her final evidence. Loyalty coiled in Declan's chest, not the blind kind, but the measured honor of men who'd lost too much to half measures. This boy, clinging to him like a lifeline, had become the Brotherhood's unspoken charge, a promise extending beyond the ring's hollow core. The trail narrowed to a rutted path, the patrol car faltering in the tighter turns, its tires squealing as it overcommitted. Declan spotted the opportunity, a blind curve ahead, flanked by thick underbrush. He signaled Owen to hold tight, then braked hard, veering into a concealed pull-off where ancient oaks screened them from view. The car thundered past, brakes screeching too late, its brake lights flaring red before it vanished around the bend. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of lingering moisture from leaves and the soft huff of the cooling engine. Owen lifted his helmet, face pale, but eyes alight with a mix of adrenaline and awe. We lost them. But Mom, the mill, we go now? Declan scanned the tree line, the ethical weight settling like dew on his shoulders. Rushing in blind risked more than capture. It tested the Brotherhood's creed of protection over pursuit, but Lena's words echoed, a mother's directive pulling at the threads of redemption he'd long buried under miles of blacktop. Rourke's rerouting. We meet at the river's edge. Quiet approach. You stay back with Sparks till it's clear. Owen's protest died on his lips at the firmness in Declan's tone, replaced by a nod that spoke of growing trust, fragile as the first light breaking through branches. Reunited at a roadside diner off the main drag, the group huddled in a back booth under the hum of fluorescent lights that buzzed like hesitant fireflies. The air smelled of greasy fries and strong tea, a mundane anchor amid the storm. Rourke spread a fresh map, his thick finger jabbing the mill's location, a derelict structure on the Briarwood River's bend, abandoned since the floods years back, its silhouette a haunt in local lore. Sparks synced the notebook scans to her tablet, cross-referencing with the chip's data, transactions tied to the site, disguised as salvage operations, funneling dirty funds through ghost crews. Kane's using it as a drop, she said, voice low, the screen's glow etching shadows on her face. Lena noted a hidden room, floor safe, maybe where she stashed originals. Jax drummed fingers on the table, impatience flickering in his young eyes, but Silas quelled it with a steady gaze. We go in measured, no guns blazing, that's their game. We expose, we extract. Do. The old-timers' words carried the weight of experience, reminding them justice wasn't forged in chaos, but in the quiet unraveling of lies. Owen sipped his soda, the fizz mirroring the bubbles of resolve rising in him, his small hand brushing the empty ring chain Declan had draped over the table's edge. A talisman shared now, binding their fates. Dusk deepened as they approached the mill on foot. Bikes stashed a mile back under camouflage netting. The river rushed nearby, its waters churning dark and insistent, carrying the clean mineral scent of wet stone and silt. The structure loomed against the skyline, a skeletal frame of rusted beams and sagging walls, vines clawing at the foundation like desperate fingers. Moonlight filtered through cracks, casting elongated shadows that danced with the wind's sigh. Declan led, boots silent on the overgrown path, the group fanning out, Rourke at point, Sparks covering flanks, Jax and Owen trailing with Silas's watchful eye. A faint light flickered from a ground-level window, not electric, but the warm glow of a lantern, suggesting recent occupancy. Declan's pulse quickened, the air growing heavier with the musty rot of decay and something sharper like fear distilled. They circled to the rear entrance, a warped door hanging ajar, and slipped inside. The interior echoed hollowly, floorboards groaning underfoot, dust motes swirling in their wake like unsettled ghosts. Stacks of forgotten crates loomed in the corners, labeled with faded ink that matched the chip's manifests, props in Kane's laundering charade. Owen froze at a scuff mark on the wall, his whisper cutting the tension. That's her handwriting. Safe below. Declan knelt, tracing the faint etching to a trapdoor concealed under a threadbare rug. Heart-hammering, he pried it open, revealing a ladder descending into dimness. The air below cool and laced with the faint, hopeful trace of lavender, Lena's scent perhaps, clinging to whatever refuge she'd carved. Rourke descended first, flashlight beam sweeping the cramped space. Concrete walls etched with more notes, a cot in the corner and a wall safe, its dial glinting dully. But as Sparks worked the combination, derived from the notebook's clues, a low rumble echoed from above, engines, multiple, grinding to a halt outside. Kane's men, or worse, the patrol closing the net. Footsteps thudded overhead, voices barking coordinates, the lantern's light spilling down like an accusation. Declan pulled Owen close, the boy's breath ragged against his side, while the safe clicked open, revealing not just documents, but a small recorder, Lena's voice preserved in digital plea. "If you hear this, Torch, it's over for me. But the files, they free Owen. Promise me you'll keep him safe." The words ignited something primal, a vow sealing in the shadows below. Rourke signaled retreat, but the trapdoor slammed shut, locks engaging with a finality that trapped them in the mill's underbelly. Shadows lengthened, the river's roar mocking their isolation as the weight of the promise pressed down, loyalty demanding they fight not with fists, but with the unyielding truth Lena had guarded. Above, the hunt closed in, testing the bonds of their chosen family in the heart of the gathering dark, where redemption hung by a thread finer than steel. The trapdoor's lock clanged shut like a judge's gavel, sealing them in the mill's underbelly with the finality of a tomb. Dust sifted down through the cracks, dancing in the beam of Rourke's flashlight, while the river's relentless rush outside vibrated the concrete walls, a muffled roar that underscored their predicament. Declan pressed Owen against the shadowed corner, the boy's chest heaving in sync with his own, the air thick with the damp chill of earth and the faint lingering trace of lavender that now twisted hope into desperation. Sparks clutched the recorder, its small form heavy in her palm, Lena's voice echoing in their minds, a spectral ally urging them onward even as boots thudded overhead, voices barking orders in clipped urgency. "Secure the perimeter! They can't have gone far!" A gravelly command filtered through, followed by the scrape of crates being shoved aside, Kane's enforcers, their movements efficient and soulless, like machines oiled by corruption. Jax tested the ladder, his muscles straining against the reinforced hatch, but it held firm, the metal groaning in defiance. Silas whispered a prayer under his breath, his hand steady on Owen's shoulder, the old-timer's calm a beacon in the encroaching dark. Declan's mind raced, piecing the notebook's clues with the chip's data. The safe's contents weren't just files, original ledgers, signed confessions from coerced workers, and a USB drive etched with timestamps linking Kane directly to Hale's bribes. Proof enough to shatter the web, but worthless if they couldn't deliver it. Rourke scanned the cramped space, his beam catching a rusted grate in the far wall, half buried under silt and cobwebs. "River access," he muttered, voice low as thunder. The group moved as one, tools whispering against corroded bolts, the grate yielding with a screech that Sparks muffled with her jacket. Cool, mineral-laced air rushed in from the tunnel beyond, a narrow vein carved by years of flooding, slick with moisture and echoing the water's growl. "Owen, you first with Silas," Declan ordered, his tone brooking no debate, lifting the boy toward the opening. Owen hesitated, eyes locking on Declan's, a silent plea mirroring the trust Lena had placed in the fire's survivor. "We'll make it. Promise." They crawled through single file, the tunnel's confines pressing like a vice, knees scraping rough stone while the lavender scent faded into the river's briny tang. Above, the search intensified, flashlights probing, radios crackling with frustration. But the water's veil concealed their escape, emerging into the night-shrouded bank, mud sucking at their boots. The group huddled under overhanging willows, their branches swaying like weary sentinels. The mill loomed across the churning current, its lanterns bobbing like false stars, but freedom tasted sharp on the tongue, laced with the unfinished vow. Declan checked the satchel slung over his shoulder, the evidence secure, its weight a reminder that justice demanded delivery, not just survival. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer, Kane's influence pulling strings, but the Brotherhood's network ran deeper, calls already dispatched to trusted allies in the Force, men who'd traded favors for honor long ago. They mounted the bikes hidden upstream, engines starting with subdued rumbles to avoid echoing back, the river's mist cloaking their retreat. Owen rode with Declan again, the wind tearing at their clothes as they pushed toward Briarwood's edge, the moon silvering the road ahead like a path etched in forgiveness. But as the town lights flickered into view, a lone figure emerged from the tree line, a woman, disheveled and pale, waving frantically from the roadside, her silhouette unmistakable from the photo. Lena Sato, alive. Her eyes hollowed by months of hiding, but burning with recognition. Declan skidded to a halt, gravel spraying like sparks, heart slamming against his ribs as he dismounted. Owen scrambled off, voice breaking in a cry that cut the night. "Mom!" Lena dropped to her knees in the dirt, arms enveloping the boy, their reunion a tangle of sobs and whispers, the air shimmering with the raw scent of relief and rain-damp earth. She looked up at Declan, her face gaunt but unbroken, the ghost from the fire now flesh and blood. "You came. The ring. I knew you'd carry it true." Her hand trembled as she touched the chain around his neck, the empty compartment, a badge of their shared ordeal. In hurried breaths, she explained. After the garage confrontation, Kane's men had taken her to the mill, but she'd slipped away in the chaos, holing up in a nearby hollow, watching for the one the note promised. The recorder was her safeguard, left to guide if she couldn't. But Kane, sensing the noose, had mobilized, patrols scouring the river, whispers of a final push to silence loose ends. Declan helped her to her feet, the group forming a protective circle, Rourke's bulk shielding them as more headlights pierced the gloom. "The files," Lena said, voice steadying. "They're everything. Hale's in deep, city funds siphoned for his campaigns, Kane the middleman. Deliver them clean, and it crumbles." The convoy reformed, Lena perched behind Sparks on her bike, the wind carrying her quiet thanks into the blur of motion. They rode straight to the county outpost, on the outskirts, a neutral ground where an old contact, a detective untainted by the rot, waited under the guise of a routine check. The handover unfolded in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, papers spread across a metal desk, the air humming with the click of keyboards and the low murmur of oaths being sworn. Kane's empire unraveled in real time, arrests rippling through radio chatter, Hale's name flashing on screens, the laundering scheme exposed like veins under skin. No guns fired, no blood spilled, just truth, wielded like a blade honed by loyalty. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, the group gathered outside the outpost, the first rays warming the dew-kissed gravel. Owen stood between Declan and Lena, his hand in hers, the boy's face alight with the quiet victory of family reclaimed. Silas clapped Declan on the back, the gesture sealing the promise's fulfillment, while Rourke and the others nodded in silent accord, the chosen kin who'd ridden through fire and shadow. Lena met Declan's gaze, words soft but profound. "You kept it safe, for him, for us." The ring, now hers again, hung between them, its hollow heart mended by the light of redemption. The road stretched open ahead, Briarwood waking to a cleaner dawn, the weight of secrets lifted like fog burned away. Declan swung onto his Harley, the engine's familiar growl a hymn to endurance, knowing Honor's legacy wasn't in grand gestures, but in the unyielding bonds that carried one through the dark. Owen waved from the car Lena had borrowed, a final promise etched in his smile. Family, forged not by blood, but by the fire that refused to claim them. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories of promise and loyalty, like Declan's, hit different when shared. If this tale of redemption touched you, hit that subscribe button and join the Brotherhood for more. Your support keeps the road open.